how connections are formed in congregations across the United States and the world. The Church of the Larger Fellowship is committed to being a resource within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. From worship to covenant groups, from classes to pastoral care, and from our monthly magazine Quest to our online community hub and our letter writing ministry, we have found ways to build connection and community, even through the screen. We have been a model for ministry on the margins, providing services for isolated Unitarian Universalists, becoming a spiritual lifeline for our members in prison. The CLF supports the ministries of those who hold target identities: Blue, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism; Trust, Transgender Religious UU Professionals Together; and Drum, Diverse Revolutionary Unitarian Universalist Multicultural Ministries, just to name a few. We know better than anyone how deep and meaningful connections can be formed, even from a distance. Unitarian Universalists have faced many challenges in these times, and we continue to persevere and fight for justice and equity for all people, especially during moments of crisis. We are proud to be a leader in this faith movement, and we invite you to get involved in our ministry. We strive to be a place where anyone from anywhere can find spiritual refuge anytime they need it. Welcome to the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We are so excited to bring you an all-new episode of The VUU. The VUU is a weekly Unitarian Universalist talk show discussing important faith-based topics from an anti-racist, anti-oppressive, and multicultural perspective. Every Thursday for the past 7 years, we have welcomed guests from every corner of the world. Our guests are writers, scholars, activists, and religious thought leaders who are shaping Unitarian Universalism and society for the 21st century and beyond. I hope today's show inspires you. Hope it builds your faith. Hope it gives you perspective to see the power of Unitarian Universalism at work in your life. Enjoy the message.
Greetings, beloved out there in VUU land, or as Keanu Dene Perkins might say, VUU land. Welcome to the Voices of Unitarian Universalism, also known as the VUU or the VUU. It is really good to be with you today. I'm the Reverend Dr. Michael Tino. I serve as 1/3 of the lead ministry team of the Church of the Larger Fellowship. I'm here in Peekskill, New York, on the land of the Kitchewan and Wappinger nations. It is cold. It is finally cold. That polar vortex that has broken off of the Arctic Circle has finally reached the Northeast, and there's snow on the ground that's not melting. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I guess if I didn't like it, I could move to California.
I'm really sure how I feel about it.
And yet I'm here. I'm a New Yorker. DC Fortune, how are you?
I am well. I am here in central Pennsylvania, coming to you from my office at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Susquehanna Valley in Northumberland, Pennsylvania. We are on the ancestral lands of the Susquehannock people, and I am in the town that is known as the place where Joseph Priestley lived out the rest of his days. When I first got here, it still is alarming that so many people know more about Joseph Priestley than I do. He's usually one of those sort of obscure historic features that a minister can impress people with odd trivia. No, they all know about him. Yeah. And we have snow here too, and I don't like it one bit. And I had to actually give in and buy a snow shovel this morning. And I'm offended, just on principle. When I graduated from seminary and I moved to California, I threw out my snow shovel and vowed never to own another one. And yeah, no, I finally gave up, and I'm like, Yeah, I got to do it. So anyway, but it's a great day here in central Pennsylvania. And no, not Joseph Priestley from 90210. Oh, God bless you, Janine. No. This is the guy with the oxygen. I'm doing well. And so how are things out there in the zona? T? T? I've only ever seen it.
I know a lot of people do that, but at least you have the right part because it's the second half of Katie, so it should be T, but it's Ty. It's a high school nickname that stuck. It's fine. I'm in Phoenix, and I'm here at lovely UUC Phoenix in my office, and I'm not allowed to talk about the weather until like April or so because
right, exactly.
Please talk about the weather. Please let us know how it is there in Arizona. Because honestly, like when it's nasty there, we make you talk about the weather too. So,
but see, I'm the person who loves the weather here. So in the summer, I love the summer here. So when I want to talk about the weather now is I want to say that it's cold and I had to wear closed-toed shoes today, and I have on a sweater with long sleeves, and it's making me very pouty and grouchy about how cold, and there were a few clouds in the sky. So I'm sorry, but the weather is hard everywhere right now, even here in Phoenix.
That's right. Before long, it'll be 120 degrees, and you will feel the water evaporating from your eyeballs.
From inside our lovely city pools. We know how to deal with the heat. I can handle the heat. I live here on purpose.
Oof, God bless you.
We also have Deborah Gray Boyd joining us. How are things where you are?
So I am in Columbus, Ohio, which is the ancestral lands of the Scioto and the Wyandotte and other traditions and tribes. And you're in my house with me. And this is my very first time on the VUU, which I'm kind of excited about. Like I got to do 10 years on the General Assembly Planning Committee and missed you all. And this is my third year on the Nominating Committee for CLF. And I have to put in a plug for the UUA Nominating Committee, where I am also serving currently. So I am excited to talk all things leadership with the VUU.
Great. So in case you haven't noticed, Ty and Deborah are joining us as members of the Church of the Larger Fellowship's Nominating Committee, and we will get into that in just a moment. We check in about the weather when we start, mostly to let people have a few minutes to join us so they don't miss the important part, which is what you're going to talk about in a moment. We have Darby with us, and we have Janine. Janine is there in frigid Phoenix, where it's going to be 73. And Darby is joining us from Texas, where the polar vortex actually has reached, and we hope that our Texan beloveds, whose houses are not nearly as insulated as those of us in the Northeast, are doing okay.
Hey Siri, what's the temperature outside?
It's 25 degrees outside.
Y'all can bite me.
6 degrees.
I told you I'm not allowed to talk about the weather.
Right. You are. You absolutely are. And you know, we all have our. If it were 6 degrees in Phoenix, you'd be really, really, really cold. So
I would have packed already.
I
grew up in the Berkshires.
Those of you who are friends with the Reverend Misha Sanders on Facebook saw that her cactus, Benny, the rescue cactus, perished in the Georgia cold, and we don't want the beautiful cacti of Arizona to suffer that fate. So it's all good. We like to start the VUU with what we call the UU Roundup, like thinking about what's going on in the larger Unitarian Universalist world. And I have no idea what that is today.
It's search season for those who are searching.
Ministerial search season is open.
All.
Yeah. Blessings upon congregations who are searching for ministers. Blessings upon ministers who are searching for congregations. May you find good matches.
Yes.
And you know, it's such a weird system.
Match.com, NFL draft.
That it's a whole different view. It's an
That's a whole
entirely different thing. And
like blessings upon everyone who's looking for leadership.
yeah,
That
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm
What
not
else-
eager
what else
to
is
ever go
going
through
on?
that again. Boo.
I know that Blue Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism just had an in-person worship
Saw
for
that.
the first time in several years, and all of my friends from Blue have posted just how much that filled their souls. And so I just want to like celebrate things that fill the souls of Black Unitarian Universalists are all good.
Yes.
Anything else we know of going on? It's January 18th, so there are 13 more days for congregations to endorse, or I don't know what the proper word is, proposed amendments to the language in Article 2.
Not much time.
Those there are several proposed amendments, and if they get 15 congregations whose boards, I don't, what would the word be? It's not really endorse, but whose boards okay them.
Make an official motion of support or something.
Yeah. Then 15 congregations, then those amendments will be part of what we discuss online at our online General Assembly in June. And if they don't get 15 congregations by February 1st, then they will be archived and be part of our history. And either way, it's lovely that people have taken the time to craft things to try and make the proposal to Article 2 better. I think people have legitimately tried to craft things to try and make that proposal better. We'll see what we get to vote on in June. Your congregation has a super guest this weekend, DC?
Yes. We have to be wary of protocols and security and things like that, but which like is real. But let's just say that we have a guest minister coming to speak to my adorable, wonderful, amazing little congregation out here in Amish country. And I have never seen this place so scrubbed and shiny in my life. It's somebody whose initials might or might not be SB.
Okay.
So yeah. So we're not doing a whole lot in the way of promotional stuff ahead of time. But holy shit, I need to clean my office. Yes. So yeah. Like that's the big excitement. I'm gonna sleep for a week when we're done.
Yay.
Well,
and undoubtedly that'll be a wonderful, wonderful service too.
Yes. Looking forward to it. But
so let's talk about the Church of the Larger Fellowship. We don't usually spend a lot of time talking about our congregation view. We tend to take this big view of Unitarian Universalism, and we talk about all sorts of things happening for liberation in our world and in our larger movement. And every now and then we get to talk about what's happening in the Church of the Larger Fellowship and with the Church of the Larger Fellowship. This congregation that has now for 10 years, and we need to get Aisha to update that intro video, for 10 years sponsored the VUU that Deborah Gray Boyd to date has not yet been on. So we're happy to have you here. And it's funny, I know how to pronounce Thai only because you for a long time were like a super VUU fan, and we would like try and read people's comments on the air, and I pronounced it wrong and everyone laughed at me. So I got laughed at too. Marlene Jones wants to know, DC, if there will be video of your visitor.
There will be. We videotape all sermons at my congregation, and they go up on there's a link to our Facebook page from our website. which is uucsv.org. This person is coming for a particular reason, and part of that is it's really wonderful. A number of years ago, well, it's wonderful and not wonderful. A number of years ago, somebody who was, back when we had districts and stuff like that, there was somebody who was a UUA staff person, was out here in the Willy Wax to do some sort of workshop for the members of the congregation. They were in some sort of process of doing something. And somebody asked this person, very point blank, are small rural congregations any sort of a priority for the UUA? And the person was painfully blunt and said no. And so I've got this congregation that now has this story that they tell about themselves, that we're not important to anybody. And so I shared that conversation with a number of people in leadership at the UUA, and then poked a few people gently and said, I think we need, some recognition out here, because frankly, in horse and buggy country, we are one of the few institutions that is doing really visible supportive work for LGBTQ folks, for abortion choice options, for banned books, for all of that stuff. We are like one of the very few voices out here doing that work. There's a part of me that says, it's easy to be a UU church in Boston, right? Try doing that shit out here, where on Sunday when you drive home from church, you have to ride for many, many minutes behind horses and buggies on their way home from church. We've got a really significant role to play in our world. And so I asked a couple of people, I said, we need somebody important to come out here. And I kept poking the important people, and eventually we're going to have somebody come who's going to hopefully do some healing work with my people and let them know that they do matter, and that this congregation does good work in a place where it is desperately needed.
Well, and that business of, I'm going to use this as a segue, that business of changing the stories that congregations tell about themselves.
Yep.
is really important ministry.
Yes.
Really important work. It was one of the things that I had to do when I first started serving the last congregation I served. Their story that they told about themselves was that we were the little congregation that couldn't. They couldn't quite.
Right.
We almost get there. That was their story. We almost get there.
Oh, God bless them.
And by the time I left 15 years later, they could. And they knew they could. And it took telling a different story. Yep. And the Church of the Larger Fellowship has also, been changing and is telling a different story about ourselves too. Right. For many years, we were, the church that was a couple of people in an office under the Pickett and Elliott House in Boston, who sent things by mail all over the world
with an overused photocopier.
Right. And times have changed, right?
Is that true?
The ways in which we interact with each other from afar has changed. They say hosting an online talk show that has been going on for 10 years.
That's amazing.
And the ways in which we understand our call to liberation in the world has changed.
Yes.
And so our nominating committee has had to change, and the ways in which we think about leadership in our church has changed. And so I want to toss it over to Ty and Deborah to talk about how those changes have happened, how you are involved in changing the story of the Church of the Larger Fellowship.
Thank you. It's been a huge privilege to do this work. And we've really done it collaboratively with the board and with the leadership team. And I think that's one of the differences is nominating isn't just pitching people over this fence onto the board, but we've actually been having conversations with the board and with the leadership team about what do you need and who can serve and how can we expand that circle of leadership? Because that the way CLF historically got their leadership is an interesting story in and of itself. And we've really been making a shift to leadership from the congregation. And we're trying to expand that from the congregation to include folks who are currently incarcerated. And we're not quite there yet, but the membership of CLF has done an amazing job of making the number of people on the board more flexible so that as we have opportunities, we can add those folks pretty much no matter where we are in the election cycle, and that there can be more than just one. And so DC is saying the pounce and capture approach to leadership development. CLF nominating took it one step further, and we actually went out beyond CLF. It was often, who do I know in the national UUA playground that might want to come play in the CLF sandbox? And so this shift to we're a congregation, and we want to make sure that the leadership is representative of our congregation, not just an extension of the national faith community, has been central to some of what we've been up to.
And I think that model of growing leadership is so important as we shift and think about liberation in general and in our structures across the faith, but within congregations specifically. I think a lot of us were raised with this idea that anyone who was a leader was like a junior president, and everyone was aiming to be the best, shiniest, top leadership position. And that's who we would recruit, is like, how close do you look to the top leadership position, and can we get you up there? When in reality, when we're talking about leadership, it's about relationship, and it's about all of the different pieces that are needed. And so when you're trying to grow leadership, you can't just be looking for presidents, whatever president means in that situation, right? And so I love the tossing people over the fence image, right? Of just like, I found someone that kind of looks like what we need for the top thing, and throwing them over. And instead being like, I found someone who's connected and can be a voice. And sometimes that's the person who hasn't spoken up at all. And approaching nominating as, how do we find all of the corners and the pieces and make sure we're holding everyone so that leadership is actually a fully capable, connected network, is huge work. And it's really cool to be part of. It's really neat to get to know a community in this way.
Well, and sorry, Deborah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, I'm also thinking about what you all have been doing, because I know what you all have been doing, in terms of like talking with people and figuring out what their pathways through leadership are. Because it's not just like, I like the way you say we're not just looking for presidents, right? But like maybe we're looking for people who like get really jazzed about personnel policy that treats the people who work for CLF like human beings, not like disposable.
That's some radical shit, Michael.
Disposable cogs in a machine, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the really important things that we've been looking at is how the Commission on Institutional Change, how that work called nominating committees to do their work differently. And so last year was the first year that we really publicly asked and created public venues of sort of a town hall kind of format where folks could talk to each other and folks could talk to people currently in leadership and say, hey, I'm interested, talk to me. And so Julica was central in having that happen. And we are really excited to have 2 opportunities just like that coming up yet this month.
And that's Julica Herman de la Fuente, who is a CLF board member and our board liaison to the nominating committee, right? So,
Yeah.
in case y'all out there in VUU land don't know who Julica is, and shame on you.
Who could possibly be
What? Yeah. I have a
teasing.
question. I have a question, and that is, and I'm just thinking about, because we're in that sort of, I'm in a small congregation with like less than 150 members, and it's one of those things where like everybody takes a turn making coffee. I mean, it's a small family-sized congregation, and there is often a firewall between minister and nominating committee that I think does know in a variety of ways, because as ministers, we sometimes has to information would be important before you say nominate somebody to be treasurer. Like had pastoral conversations with people, we may know things that would be, I don't want to say disqualifying, but would really be worth considering in the process of how to develop leadership. It sounds like you're working with the board and the ministerial team to recruit and develop leadership. Can you tell me about that?
Well, and it's not just about who maybe shouldn't be in leadership yet, or who shouldn't be in leadership in this particular position.
Right.
But about people who those folks know that we don't know yet, because ministers so often know other people in the congregation, and the board has more and more people that are in well, everybody on the board's in CLF, but are engaged with CLF in a way that they know other CLF members.
Right.
And so that's really an important part of what we're doing because it is collaborative and it is relational. And that's so central to what we're attempting to do. Absolutely.
Okay.
And we want people that are connected and in relationship and being supportive of the mission. You
Right.
don't want to put somebody on the board who's like, what's CLF? No.
Right.
Well,
Right.
and if I might, let me say a few things about the firewall that you speak of, not to pick on any particular congregation, but I don't think that serves us well.
Right. That's what I was saying.
To say you don't get to know, like that's the pitch them over the fence model, right?
Right.
You take whoever flies over the fence.
Whoever's slow enough to get close.
Right? Like whoever flies over the fence, you have to deal with. And it doesn't allow us to chart a new course for how we want the congregation to be.
Right.
Right? So if we want our congregation, for example, and Deborah, you brought this up, to actually be accountable to the voices of incarcerated Unitarian Universalists, who are now almost 60% of the membership of CLF, almost 1,800 incarcerated Unitarian Universalists are part of our congregation. So, we couldn't ignore their voices when it was 200, but at 1,800, it's not responsible. It's not responsible.
It's malpractice.
Leadership. Right. So we want our congregation to be and to be accountable to their voices. Well, then we need to figure out how to get voices who understand that accountability into our leadership. That's really hard when so many of those folks are incarcerated, because our prison industrial complex throws up barriers to participation and things like that. Financial barriers, time barriers, access barriers, you name it. And like they invent new barriers when the old barriers aren't serving them. But if there were a firewall between the leadership, the ministry team, the lead ministry team, and the nominating committee, we couldn't say this is really important to us, and like give the nominating committee the space and the support to figure out how we're going to do this. Now, you said, Deborah, we haven't figured it out, but we're working on it.
Well, and the boards had some really important conversations about that.
Right.
And nominating was part of inviting those conversations and asking for that time to have those conversations. And we've read some books and we've invited the board to do some work. And I feel like we both have made progress, and we needed to acknowledge the progress that was already in the room. There are people who are serving and people in leadership who are in relationship, close familial relationship with people who have been part of the industrial prison complex. And so it was important to not have this story about we're not in the room when folks are in the room, because that is so often part of how the supremacy culture works, and not acknowledging how we're already here. But the other piece is this discernment piece. Like, not every job is the right job for everybody. Like there are people who absolutely need to be in RE space with tiny humans with itty bitty toes, and there are people who need to be the perennial treasurer for their congregation, and they aren't necessarily always the same person.
Oh, thank you, God.
And sometimes they are, but it's important to be able to talk to people so they can be successful, so that they can figure out what's right for them. And so one of the big shifts on nominating has been trying to have these discernment conversations with people. What are your skills? What are your talents? What are your gifts? How do you want to contribute? So that we can try to match people up in a really powerful way, so that their contributions can be received full-heartedly and taken advantage of in service to this larger faith that we all are so dedicated to.
And I think it's so important to know that those conversations that we have, sort of their two-on-one conversations with people, aren't interviews, aren't about discluding someone from leadership based on 10 questions that someone has to answer correctly, but it really is about building up that relationship and getting to know that person. Because when someone has a willingness and a heart to lead and step into helping shape the body, there is somewhere that they can shape it, right? There's somewhere, and we haven't perfected it. We haven't figured out how to plug in all of the people to all of the places, but being able to say, we don't need 22 presidents. You know, these are the pieces that we need, and how can we grow that relationship? Because, not to say that this is the least of it, but if nothing else, in us getting to know the person and nominating, getting to know someone who's coming forward in leadership, we now get to know all of the people that they're connected to as well. And we get to see that piece of that network. So it ties in another piece to the web in a new knot and in a new place. So we're closer linked together. And I think that's really important, that it's not an audition. It's more about like, how can we get to know you? How can we figure out that as a community who are all so spread out, right? We don't all see each other in the same building on Sunday mornings. How do we make that closer knit and tight in a way that's very, very real, and where those connections are really true? Because when I'm talking to you two-on-one because you want to be in a leadership position, and my son comes running in, you know, to tell me about something the dog has done, and your cat knocks over your coffee, our connection strengthens. And it's in those moments that like our community reels itself in a deep way.
And you know those things are going to happen too.
All of you have seen my children run into the room with some sort of animal-related emergency.
Absolutely. And they not only happened, but nominating was really intentional on having two people from nominating or our board liaison or whatever do those conversations with the one person who's interested in serving.
Oh, good.
Because we wanted to have multiple lenses and multiple perspectives. We never wanted one person from nominating to be in the position of reporting back to the body, you know, This is where this person might or might not fit in with the things that we're trying to look for right now.
Right. Pounce and capture.
Well,
So
go on, Deborah.
no, I was just saying we've tried to be intentional and build structure.
And this we really want to get to know you philosophy is changing the story of CLF.
Right.
I mean, it wasn't too long ago that it really wasn't possible to know people that well.
Right.
In a 3,000 member congregation scattered all over the world. And it's possible now, right? So
Yeah.
let's do it.
The double-edged sword of technology and pandemic forced us to change in a bunch of different ways. So, and I see Deborah writes, we've been blessed with more folks wanting to be in leadership than, say that, what? More folks wanting to be in leadership than elected posts. So you've had, you haven't had empty places on the slate, is what you're saying.
What I'm really saying is often we have a story of scarcity. Like there are not enough people. Oh my God, who is going to serve on the board this year? Who can we talk into being treasurer again? Whatever that story might be.
You're not speaking from experience, though.
No,
Absolutely not. And because we're working towards relationship, there has been this abundance, this generosity that has invited a new way of understanding of CLF understanding itself, because CLF was two people in a basement. CLF was one of our most staff-driven congregations that we had in the entire association. And it did not have this robust infrastructure of ways that people as laity contributed to the congregation. And so there's really a shift within CLF of wanting to have this more engaged community relational piece. And that's happening. And I know that's happening because people are saying, hey, I want to do more. I have some time. I want to contribute. And so we're creating this abundance through the richness of these relationships, which is just lovely.
Yeah, I mean, even we look at something like Quest, which is the CLF's monthly publication. For years, Quest was the ministers of CLF asking their professional colleagues to submit things that then went out to the membership of CLF.
right.
And it was never asking the members of CLF to reflect on questions and send in their reflections so that we share them with other people. And that's like the old school technology, right? Quest, the printed magazine. But we now include in every episode, in every issue, the opportunity to send in reflections. Now, the truth is that it's almost entirely our incarcerated members who actually send in those reflections. But those are the folks who are desperate for actual connection.
Yes.
With people, and they're getting it.
How amazing is that?
Well, and whether or not it's desperation, it's creating access and creating a pathway for the voice. And if that's where the pathway is for the voice, then the people who don't have any other pathways should be the ones using it. And I think that for me, that connects to the responsibility of aiming towards liberation in general, is when we create access paths, who needed that first and who needed it the most, and making sure that it's open to them because everyone else is served by that as well. But also thinking about leadership and how people step into their pathway to leadership in an organization. At least in the US, I think to some extent, we are taught that representational democracy is the gold standard for how we do leadership and how people can be represented. But we know that that system itself, it can be so oppressive, right? It can be horribly abusive in terrible ways. And so how do we as an organization really striving towards liberation go beyond that step and say, what does that mean for leadership? It doesn't mean whoever has the most campaign dollars or whoever's the shiniest or looks closest to the potential president, looks like the last guy. becomes the leader. It's how do we do that based in relationship? Because we know so much of liberation comes out of relationship. And so if CLF at its core is finding our leaders out of this liberatory practice, then that's a huge step forward in everything else we do, including how we work with finances or how we work with personnel. It's because we're starting in a place of liberation. And it's so important. Those roots of action are so, so important.
Absolutely. And that leverage, because we don't have dollars for campaigns, but in my experience in Unitarian Universalism, that leadership currency is either through professional religious professionals, because they have professional development budgets to go spend the time and the transportation to do the things, or lay leaders who have the financial independence to have the time to make the investment. If you don't have time to volunteer a half-time job, and there just aren't that many people out there who have time to volunteer a half-time job.
And the demographic that does have that time is very limited.
Yeah. And not representative.
No, exactly. Exactly.
Talk to me a little bit about the leadership opportunities that you're seeing right now, from the elected things to the non-elected, appointed, or volunteer committee things. What are the leadership opportunities you're seeing?
What a lovely question. So we need 3 or 4 folks to be serving on the board of CLF. The CLF board is required by the bylaws to be between 9 and 11 people. We also need somebody to take the seat that I'm currently in on the nominating committee, which is a 3-year term. And we recently had Michelle need to step away for personal reasons, nothing to do with the committee. It's like, there's no secret here. And so there's a 2-year term with nominating as well that's open. But there are also spots with the personnel committee, and there are spots on the fundraising committee, and there are some other places. I know you, Michael, have been working on, how can we create a more robust pipeline of leadership coming up and out of the congregation, where are some places that people can contribute. So folks can help with worship, and there's some opportunities with covenant groups and those types of things. And so there are all sorts of ways to contribute, whether you have a little bit of time or a lot of time, but CLF's making this big transition.
And so, right, there are covenant groups that need leaders. There are, we have a fantastic group of people that facilitate our Sunday coffee hour. Several of whom have actually taken on roles on the board because they're involved leaders who we get to know really well, because they do this every week. We have fundraising committee, a finance committee, a personnel committee. So as I said, right now our personnel committee is looking at aligning our fair compensation values. If that lights a fire under you, say that to someone on our nominating committee, please. The last thing that the personnel committee worked on was healthcare costs, and the personnel committee, and I'll say this is one of my favorite CLF stories, because I had nothing to do with it. I was purely a bystander to this. Our personnel committee decided that the ways in which healthcare is done in the United States is fundamentally unjust. Or at least they didn't decide that. They came to that realization because it is. And presented to the board a 6-year plan to phase in 100% healthcare coverage for CLF staff and their families. And the board said to them, well, if it's fundamentally unjust, maybe we should just do it now and not phase it in over 6 years. And the personnel committee just sort of sat there like, okay. In the board meeting, because the board was like, well, you've made a really good case that it's fundamentally unjust. And so we need to do something about it. And so for the last 2 years, everyone who is eligible for health care on the CLF staff gets 100% coverage for them and their families.
Wow.
Not 80% for the person and 50% for families or whatever, like the recommendation is 100%. Does that cost us a whole lot of money? Yes, it does. And if you'd like to donate to CLF, we'll let you know how to do that out there. We would like your money to help pay for healthcare coverage for our staff. But like if, as I said, treating staff as as human beings and confounding the ways in which our capitalist system makes employment fraught. If that lights a fire under you, let someone on the nominating committee know. Because
Right.
if you're on the personnel committee.
Well, and that's the kind of change that's possible when you're around the table. It is such a privilege to be around the table. And that privilege comes with a responsibility, but that privilege comes with opportunity to make the world a better place, to make our faith a better faith, and which is just lovely. So DC said that you're on UUMA nominating.
Yes, I am.
I mentioned I'm on UUA nominating. Are
Right.
there any other nominating tables currently represented on the VUU?
I used to be on Loretta nominating committee, not anymore, but also the secret that we're not talking about. So we have some nominating committee spots open, but like if you're on nominating committee, you get to control the world because you get to
It's
talk
true.
to who's
It's
going to
so
be
freaking
where and what.
true. Well, ish.
And we do
Ish.
it towards liberation, right? It's that whole thing of like, if you have an idea about what should be, this
Right.
amazing image, you get to work towards shaping that.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and it's so important that we're not, the whole reason we don't do the contested elections that so many folks talk about and are focused on is because we are able to shape a much more complete and robust and integrated leadership team by being intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I will never forget, I think it was Susan Ritchie, but I could be wrong, was telling the story about the old UUA board where we elected them out of the districts and how that knitted together the association through the bodies of the people that were sent to Boston. But that all the bodies of all the people that were sent to Boston were almost all the same folk. They held the same identity. They had the same worldview. They had the same set of experiences because each of those elections was happening in a district that all turned out the same kind of person. And so we're able to be much more intentional about making sure that those voices are representative and take that liberatory lens.
Yeah, we did the same sort of thing with the UUMA nominating committee. In fact, the UUMA rewrote the bylaws to expand and make the nomcom a little bit more flexible so that it could be as diverse as possible. And so, and one of the cool things, and so we do that when we meet. One of the first things we say is, we've got these positions that need a voice in them, whose voice is currently not at the table, whose voice has been historically excluded, and hush you, and who, and how do we make sure we don't send a person into a situation where they are the only person holding their particular set of identities, right? Let's make sure that we're setting people up to succeed by making sure that they have the support, the collegial support in whatever realm that is, so that they're not the only person of color on this particular board or the only trans person on this particular committee or like that kind of stuff. The nominating committee, my experience with the nominating committee on the UUMA nomcom has really deepened my appreciation for how vital an engaged nominating committee is to the health of an organization. Just because, for that reason, if you can get beyond the pounce and capture model, we need somebody with a pulse, right? You don't have to do much. We'll just prop you in a corner. Just, right? Remember, Joan Rivers used to have a thing about trying to find a husband for her daughter. We need a last single man in New York. You got a pulse? He's dead. Nah, he's still breathing. We'll prop him up. Right? So so often our recruiting efforts look like that because they come from a model of scarcity and a model of desperation as opposed to a model of abundance and opportunity. Like, how much richer can our conversation be if we have diverse voices at this table? And how much more powerful and truth-telling capacity we can have if we have a diverse group informing our decisions and guiding our mission for the future, as opposed to sort of feeling like you weren't smart enough to get away. Yeah, I gotta sneeze. Give me a minute. But if you're not smart enough, like they used to say about jury pool, right? Jury duty, you got 12 people who weren't smart enough to get off the jury, right? We often used to look at nominating stuff as the same sort of way, Well, I was the one that was slower than the rest, right? They didn't catch the rest, they caught me. Like, that's not how we do leadership development, or that's not a healthy way or particularly productive way to do leadership development.
So, DC, while you sneeze, I
you.
want Ty and Deborah to tell us a little bit more about the forums that are coming up, because we have a couple minutes left, and there are 2 forums that Lucretia has put information about in the chat. But can you tell us more about what's going to happen at those?
Sure. So one is January the 23rd, and it's from 8 to 9 Eastern. And the other one's on January 28th, right before worship service from 6 to 6:45. And we're just going to be in community together, having a conversation between the people who show up about what's leadership for you. How do you like to show up? What are you interested in? As well as sharing a little bit more about the particular needs within CLF around the board table, especially around how we're shifting the financial structure of CLF. It's really important that the board be engaged in the conversation about how do we make CLF sustainable, as such a large percentage of folks are currently incarcerated. Our brick and mortar model of, everybody should, contribute and make a pledge, and hopefully it's X percent of their adjusted gross annual budget, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't work. And so the board is really central in having those conversations with the staff and with the finance committee and those kinds of things about how that's going to go forward. And then we just get to say thank you, because gratitude is always where I love to start and finish. And being grateful for folks showing up and exploring. There's nothing, if you show up at the town hall, you will not be required to run for office. I'm saying that now.
You're not, oh my God, there's someone at the town hall. You're going to be on the CLF board.
No. But you will be invited to have one of these 2-on-1 conversations if you're interested in learning more. If you're willing to talk to us about where you might be able to contribute, we would love to have those continuing conversations with you. And so after the town halls, people will be invited to sign up for one of these 2-on-1 conversations, and that'll be the next step.
And if you'd like to come to the town hall, clfuu.org/leadership-forum, and that should be in the chat on both Facebook and YouTube. If it's not, we'll make sure it is very soon. But if you're listening to us on the podcast, clfuu.org/leadership-forum. and that'll get you all the information you need to RSVP for one of those fora, I guess. I don't know. One
Yeah,
of those
because
fora.
we don't want to be there by ourselves. So please come say hi to us.
And I think for folks who have lived or live in rural areas and you've been to those town hall meetings, you've been to town council meetings, this is that same thing. It's getting to look in on your neighbors, getting to see what your community's doing, figuring out who's doing what and how kids are doing at school and whose farm is doing what. You can tell where I grew up. Whose plow broke down, those kind of things. But that's what this is. It's not about you have to lead. It's let's hear what's going on and let's hear what the structures are and get to know each other so that we can grow this bigger and better again and again.
And it's an opportunity for you to say, here's what really excites me about being part of CLF, and let us put that in our collective leadership brain and see where it goes, right? That the nominating committee is also a bunch of really super creative people who can say, well, that's what excites you about CLF. Maybe these are the relationships we should encourage you to have. Because we want people doing the stuff that's exciting to them.
Absolutely.
And it's important to feel like a contributing member of a group. Marge Piercy talked about to be of use, and one of the things that that we've been working on here is when we get a new family or a new person who shows up, let's find out why they came and what they're looking for, but also what they have to offer. Because people like to come someplace where they get stuff, but they also like to come someplace where they feel needed and appreciated and valued for what they can contribute. And for folks who can't contribute a bunch of money, sometimes these volunteer slots are exactly the way to connect in a really deep way and feel ownership of a non-monetary type of an organization. Longtime volunteers are longtime members.
Well, you often get out what you've also contributed. So I know that, just to share as a gratitude, my time on the CLF nominating committee has been a huge gift to me. It is such a lovely group of folks where I show up and I am seen and my quirkiness is appreciated. And that's not always the case, but it is at the CLF nominating committee table. And so I just am so grateful to be able to be part of that, and then to be able to invite other people to have that same experience.
Well, at CLF, we love your quirkiness. We love everybody's quirkiness. We understand that it takes all of our collective quirkinesses to make this movement for liberation actually happen. We have about a minute left. Ty and Deborah, do you have any last things that you want to make sure we say?
That everyone deserves to have a full community experience, and that includes volunteering and being present in all the ways. And so everyone, you deserve it.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been another hour on The VUU. Thank you. It's so good to talk to you, Deborah and Ty. And I don't know who's going to be on next week. It might just be DC and Aisha and Chris and I concentrating on the world. Or there might be a guest. I haven't looked at the schedule and I don't know, but this has been The VUU episode 412?
13.
413.
It says so right up at the tippy top.
Oh my God, it says it right at the top of my screen.
Right? Isn't that exciting? This new tech, I tell you, it's fancy pants.
Who knew? Go in peace, beloved, and we'll see you next week.
Be well, all.
Thank you for joining us. Special thanks to those of you who give generously to this ministry. It is because of you that this ministry is possible. You can click the link in the description to give now, or visit clfuu.org/give for more information. We hope you will join us next week for another episode of The VUU.